Can you believe that we're doing our own ad, that we're reading it?
Hey, it's us.
Can't believe it.
Today's episode is sponsored by none other than Deadcool.
Deadcool is actually one of our favorite brands of all time, not only because they make truly the most fantastic products, but also because it's founded by our dear friend Karina, who is such a powerhouse. She's a total badass, and she is a female, Latina, Italian founder of one of the best brands of all time.
Deadcool is a fragrance brand for all, and we are all truly in love with it. And by we all, I mean our entire friend group. I wear the milk scent specifically every single day, and my number one compliment is always how good I smell. And that compliment has even gotten more copious and abundant ever since I've been starting to wear milk.
They stand for putting the planet first. They're carbon neutral and commit to the 1% for the Planet initiative. All of their products are non-toxic, biodegradable, vegan, organic, and 100% waterless. The list goes on and on. They're sustainable as can be.
They're also functional and genderless. Like the whole point is that these products are for all. They're for everyone. Aaron and I share the sense in products. We love everything that Deadcool stands for and truly swear by and love and use these products every single day.
We love you so much, Deadcool. Thank you so much for being our first sponsorship.
It makes so much sense it's you.
Check out Deadcool. All the links will be in our show notes.
Then you can smell like us.
Join us there.
It's Brittany, bitch, and we're back.
We're back.
And just like that, season 2, like we never left you.
And we sure did.
We sure ditched you for a lot longer than we said we were going to.
Not that much longer. We said May.
No, like a week.
We said May.
We said May. This is basically
beginning
May.
of June.
It's May while we record.
Sure is.
Loophole.
That is a good loophole.
But hi, everyone. Thank you for being patient with us. We're back, baby.
Welcome
Season 2 started off with a fucking bang.
We're so happy to be back. And we have such a fun guest as our return to the mic episode. You gonna tell them who it is?
It's the perfect way to start. It's Mr. Nick Viall.
If you guys have been listening to the podcast, you know that Miss Natalie Joy, our pride and joy.
Love of our
life.
Our pride and joy. Truly.
She came on the pod and it was just spectacular. Crushed it. And ever since I became friends with Natalie, Nick has had no choice but to also deal with me. And It's been wonderful. And we love him. And we're so grateful that he came on. If you guys don't know, I'll fill you in. I feel like you should know. But if you don't know, Nick is
like, it's more likely you don't know who we are. So hi.
Yeah. All of Nick's people that came to listen to this episode.
Real.
Hi, I'm Gaby. Yeah. That's Meadow.
Hi, I'm Meadow.
Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. But if you don't know, the one of you on here who lives under a rock, Nick is so many things. He's an entrepreneur. He became well known in the pop culture space because he was on The Bachelorette a couple of times. And then he was The Bachelor and did big things doing that. And then he went on to, he has an essential oil company, which like
the range
giving. He has a very successful podcast called the Viall Files, and it's basically just like the best relationship podcast. Meadow and I like tell him this in the episode. He's like the only man we think deserves to have a microphone to talk about relationships. So it's fine.
And he gets the best guests on and then like really unpacks shit with them. Like I think the whole first like 10 minutes of this episode was me geeking out over him having the ultimatum people on.
Oh my God.
And like
forgot we did
him
that
for insider tea.
Fun fact, we're recording
it's like the first 10 minutes.
Literally, we were recording this intro like a month later. And what else? Oh, very important. He came out with a book. It's available for pre-order. It's called Don't Text Your Ex Happy Birthday, which I think is a hilarious name. And
it's perfect for you. Gaby got to read the book.
I did.
Prior to its release and loved it. You were texting me as you were reading it, like cracking up about the different points. What was it, like player versus fuckboy, and like all the different chapters and anecdotes that he has.
It was a great book. I'm very honored that Nick asked me to give it a skim and give him my thoughts. And I don't know, I thought it was very well done. I say this, I think, too, in the episode, but like it's a really nice contrast and balance, I would say, of anecdotal stuff versus actual non-judgmental, I've been here, I get it type of advice. which I
Mm,
really
mm.
appreciate, and it's not about him. You know what I mean? He
Yeah,
interjects
yeah,
just the amount
I
of
do.
anecdotes to where you don't feel disconnected from the author, but it's not about him.
Which is similar to his style of advice giving on his
No, the
podcast.
book is written the
Like, it
way that
all
he
stems
talks, for
from
sure.
yeah, it all stems from, like, his personal experiences and, like, meeting you where you're at by understanding the same levels of, like, emotions or background behind what you're feeling going through this drama or whatever. But then he gives very inclusive and
Right.
accessible
So we
advice.
obviously harassed him to give us that advice on the podcast.
Yeah.
And
Of
we
course,
talked about
as we
we talked
do.
about the book. We talked about, of course, so many relationship cues, but we also talked a lot about him growing up in a Catholic
Mhm.
family and how that impacted his views on sex and relationships, et cetera, all the fun
Life
things.
before fame.
Life before fame.
We wanted to figure out who Nick
Who's
was, the
Wisconsin
true
Nick?
Nick. Who's your inner
We
child?
talked about it. We sure talked
We
about it. We
did.
talked about the ultimatum. So many good things. This episode is jam-packed. We think it's a beautiful way to come back with season 2, and we can't wait for your thoughts. Enjoy.
Thank you for being patient with
I know.
us. I hope you loved the episode. And shout out to our group chat. If you want to join the group chat, come on our Patreon, baby. You can the lowest tier gets you into our group chat, which is basically like our peer support group in your pocket.
Look at
So
Meadow, like,
come join the
advertising the
fam.
fuck out of us. Go team. We have a Patreon now.
Season 2, baby. I'm learning how to self
I'm
promo.
not. Glad you are. We love you. Enjoy the episode. Meadow has a bone to pick with you.
Oh yeah, I have a bone to pick with you. And it's the fact that I got no work done because I saw that your podcast with April came out and I sped watched the rest. I had like 3 episodes of The Ultimatum left. It's all I've done today was sped get through it because I'm dying to fucking listen to that shit. I'm literally gonna get off this and watch her thing with April. I'm so excited.
Well, let me know what you think.
I will.
I listened today.
Oh, you did? What'd you
Sure
think?
did.
What'd you think?
Well, I
What'd you think?
finished the reunion last night in like the wee hours, and I called Meadow this morning and I was like, I've been sleeping so badly. And I
Wild.
think it's because I've been watching The Ultimatum before bed in bed, like all night.
I think it's a great show. It's just
It
very
is a good show.
It's I think incredibly relatable.
I like what you said in your episode, how you were like, I like it because it's one of the only dating shows that we've seen with couples actually coming into it, not like finding
Right.
love.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
true.
Some critics, they're like, "Oh, we hate how the couples are so young," and I was just like, that. I just thought that was just kind of dumb. One, if you talk about these couples as if like, oh, they're so young, there's just a bunch of like early 20 people like fighting over stupid stuff. It's like, sure, yeah, but like either you were never in love in your 20s or you forget
Right.
what it was like. And when you're in your early 20s and in love, like it's no less real. It's no less.
Exactly.
Also, like we still have a country where, like, I mean, the average median age for marriage for women is like 27, and for men it's
Right.
28, which means that there's still a large number of people, especially like in the Midwest or the South, who, like, again, getting married in your early to mid 20s is still super normal
That's
and more
exactly what I was gonna
common.
say.
I mean,
And
one of our best friends is 23, and I feel like no one is more prepared to be a wife than Maddie Bragg. That girl is
Oh
ready
yeah,
to be wifed
Nick
up.
knows. Nick knows Maddie. Like
oh
Maddie
yeah,
could
You
yeah,
know
pop out.
Maddie.
yeah, yeah.
She
She's
could have a child
yeah,
tomorrow, and I wouldn't blink twice.
totally.
Sure, but also for the people who are in love and like really legitimately in love, but
hmm
but they're in a relationship and maybe it's their first or second serious relationship, and they've thought about marriage and they've thought about, this is my person, and they've played house in their mind or with their partner, and then shit happens and they has problems and they're just like, do I work through it or do I look for something better? Like, that's what I liked about The Ultimatum. It put a focus on compatibility in relationships,
Mm,
where compatibility is not something that's often talked about as much in relationships because it's not
hmm
romantic. Compatibility is more practical.
yeah.
Chemistry is romantic, so people like focusing on chemistry rather than compatibility. But compatibility plays a huge role, and I think there's a lot of young couples who feel the pressures of society to settle down, especially if you're from a more conservative and traditional part of the country. And that's what I liked about The Ultimatum, because it I think was kind of, it showed, obviously, for what a lot of people who are older, you know, who maybe have gone through it, and that's why they kind of sound condescending. It's like, oh, these younger couples, like we don't want to watch a well-balanced, thoughtful discussion between two mature 35-year-old people who'd be like, you know what, like maybe you're just not my person, because they know what it's like to like go through a relationship and break up and move on. But it's scary.
Yeah.
And when you're in your early 20s and you've never done it before, or you went through, maybe you had your heart broken once and all you want to do is not go through that again.
I hear you. What did you think about in the beginning, especially like the first couple episodes, when they kept talking about the women, particularly were talking about how all of their men were using not being financially stable as an excuse to not marry them? Because I was like, I wouldn't want to. I understand that from my perspective of like, I feel like if I'm not in a place financially where I feel so grounded, I feel like a child. And I'm like, I would feel silly in a wedding dress. And I also don't want to marry someone like I think his name Zay. And he was like, yeah, I'm still like, graduating college. Not that like everyone needs to graduate college on like the same timeline, but it was like, yeah, that's a valid point. He wants to finish school. Like, I don't know. What did you think
Or
about that?
even when it was an excuse, like who was it? April was the one. I think it was April that was like, it's a fucking excuse by the same guy over and over. In my head, I was like, well, even that's a problem. If you can't just like accept the fact that he doesn't want to marry you right now, and I have to like pull out any bullshit excuse I can because it's just not my truth and I don't want to, like, can't that just be an answer too? Like, why don't we talk about the fact that we have to make up something else?
We have this ingrained in our mind that if we've been dating for someone for a certain period of time, we need to do something, and that next something is often a proposal or marriage. I mean, there's something to be said. They say in business, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that's just kind of how humanity works. I think we desire the need to evolve, and that's why relationships are tough, because after you get married, there's like, what's the next thing? I guess we'll have kids, and then what do we do when our kids get older? I think that's why there's a lot of divorce after you become an empty nester, because it's like, well, what now?
Yeah.
They're like left with themselves.
Yeah.
When you look at the couples from The Ultimatum, it's not, that's what I liked about it, because it's not like, there's no one like at fault. Like you watch The Bachelor and it's like characters are oversimplified into heroes and villains. And on The Ultimatum, you just kind of had everyone was just a flawed human with attractive characteristics and flaws and toxic qualities and endearing qualities and things like that, which is, I think, super relatable to people like who are out there. I mean, we've all been toxic,
100%.
Of course.
in a relationship.
Yeah.
I think we're sometimes afraid to acknowledge that, because I think the internet has kind of watered down some of these kind of key words. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're toxic. Oh, no, I'm not toxic, because they don't want to be considered abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you asked about like The Ultimatum. I mean, finances, like on one aspect, it's a relatable thing to want to be financially secure before you settle down. But it's also kind of bullshit, because you figure it out. Like most people's parents, like, I mean, my generation, like our parents, like, didn't have anything when they got married and started having kids. They just figured it out. That's how it used to be. You didn't family plan, and you didn't like, you just, you're like, oh, we're in love, let's get married. And we'll figure
Where
it
like
out.
now the conversations on The Ultimatum were literally like, well, we can't have 4 kids because financially that's not realistic. But like, I bet I could afford 2, maybe. Like, it's fully planned out.
I still think it's ultimately BS, like in terms of, because when you want something, especially when it comes to love and relationships, you will put up with anything.
Well, this is what I said the whole time. When I first started watching the show, I texted Gaby and I was like, I kind of don't get it, because if that was really your person, this wouldn't be a question. Like if like I don't know. I just feel like if you were really there with your person, if like certain issues that were this big of a deal, like marriage or not marriage. I'm someone that never wanted to get married. Like, and my parents were married till one of them died. Like they had a great marriage, whatever. It just wasn't for me. The second I got with my partner I'm with now and found out that's important to him, changed everything for me. So I feel like if you're with the right person, those things become less of a ultimatum. But then I don't know, 2 of them ended up together. So clearly I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I like this show. After talking to April, I found out that, like, obviously they were approached by the show. So hearing April talk about how they got on the show,
they were approached by the show, not she went.
No,
Oh,
they
found her on Instagram.
Spoiler alert.
Wow.
They found them on Instagram and kind of commented on their Instagram, because so it's not as if like April had been like giving say Jake an ultimatum for 6 months, and then the show found him. It was kind of like
Wow, that's
It pulled back
interesting.
the
it
curtain in a way that's
it
like,
seemed like a
"Hey."
little less sincere of an ultimatum
Yes,
Okay,
than was originally presented.
I agree.
interesting.
It was like, which one would be more realistic to give an ultimatum? But I do think it was sincere that April wanted to
For sure.
get engaged. I think she was
Mhm.
Yeah.
very much ready, and but it wasn't like she was like threatening to break up with him. But it was like, yeah, no, I
Right.
definitely want to, and maybe this will ignite a flame in Jake. I think
Whew.
so. It wasn't totally disingenuous, but it wasn't like
It wasn't of her volition or her
Right.
initiation per
She didn't
yeah.
se.
approach the show being like,
Yeah.
"I've been in this dilemma
Right,
Yeah.
where
exactly.
XYZ is
I
happening."
gave
Right.
him an ultimatum. I'm ready to
Right.
leave, but
Which is how it's presented. Like, to the person that wouldn't know or
Right.
doesn't know shows like me, that's clearly how it's presented.
While we could talk to you about the ultimatum for 100 years, there's so many things we want to talk to you about. First, though, we start all of our episodes by asking our guests to give us a little preview into something that they're unpacking. Is there something that you're unpacking at the
like
moment?
literally
Take it
I
like
as you
my
mean,
will. Like
my
sure.
luggage from
Teffy, like listen, Teffy came on and was like, I haven't taken a shit in front of my boyfriend yet, and it's like making me feel weird. Whereas other people are like, I'm super depressed. So
Mommy
like,
issues. Yeah.
you know, go take it where you will. But you're literally unpacking from Coachella, so there's that.
well, Natalie and I were very similar in a lot of ways, which I've learned to really appreciate. But we both have a habit of like refusing to pack when we get home.
Oh,
We let it sit there for a day or two.
me. I feel that.
But the goal is that we both do it. So neither of us get on each other's nerves in that regard. What am I unpacking? Like, I mean, like using Teffy's example, there's nothing I'm currently like dealing with that I mean,
That's
I guess
fine too.
I have a therapist, you know.
What about last lesson learned in therapy? Like, instead of
Mm,
what you're going through right now, what's like the last thing you just learned about yourself, or like a new lesson that you've been taking with you recently?
My therapy is always centered around Jeff.
Hi,
we
Jeff.
love that you have a dog with a human name, by the way. It's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
Thank you. My therapy is always some version of not ruminating and
Mm,
not making learning to let things go that are bothering me. So yeah, it's reinforced, like that's why I started therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always just like a reminder to know how to like if a problem or anxiety comes up or something that's worrying me that I'm dealing with, just to acknowledge and to not acknowledge it, be like, yeah, it's bothering me. Okay. Like now I've acknowledged it, and then have the thought of like, okay, this is the situation. This is what it is and this is what it's not, and then like letting it go. Cause like
Mm.
I would normally just obsess over it over and
Mm.
over and
same.
over and over, and which was really no point. So I just have to actively tell myself to let it go, which I'm a huge believer in, like, controlling your thoughts, which
Yeah, me too.
you can do, and I was definitely one of those people who pretended that you couldn't. Like I had no control over things that popped in my head, and that's just not true. And you certainly have control of how long you allow yourself to think about things and obsess over
Hmm.
them. Like you could just not, you know.
Because it's a lot
Um,
easier to recognize a thought and call it out and change it than it is to like tell yourself to stop feeling sad. It's like CBT. You
Right.
can't control your feelings or physical symptoms. Like, if you're anxious and you have a stomach ache, I can't look at my stomach and be like, grow up. I don't want to be anxious anymore. But I can look at my thoughts and be like, okay, am I ruminating? Am I obsessing? Like, can I
yeah,
counteract that with a different thought? What else can I think about? So you're right.
Right.
It is in your control in a different way.
yeah. You can stop asking yourself why when you don't need to understand. Yeah, it's accepting things,
That's a
which is
good one.
hard for us
That is
to
a good
do.
one. It's a very good one.
Yeah.
When we were preparing for this episode, we both were looking at each other and we were like, okay, obviously we want to talk to you about the book. We want to talk about relationships, but there was one thing that we were like, we have so many questions about your childhood and like who you were pre anything to do with any sort of entertainment. And I
Okay.
was texting Natalie, and she was like, "He grew up real Catholic." And I was like, say less." I go,
Yeah.
"Say less." Can we talk about that? Like,
Yeah, sure.
do you have any sort of shame around religion?
Or I guess we should start with what's your relationship with religion right
Yeah,
now?
there you
Like,
go.
how was your trajectory in the past and what is it right now?
Well, I didn't realize it was Easter.
There you go.
While you were at Coachella, it didn't occur to you that
I was like, oh, it was
Jesus woke
Easter.
up? Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, yesterday was Easter. Wow, like I completely missed it. So that helps put that in perspective.
Great.
Mhm.
I also will say like a Hail Mary every now and then. It's like meditation. Anytime I feel like I'm having an unhealthy thought or a negative thought, or I'll see someone like I see a negative situation, I just say I weirdly have this habit of like saying a Hail Mary. I don't know why.
It's a good
You grew up around
replacement.
it.
Yeah.
It's just like it's still like a it's a prayer. Like so my relationship is like I'm weirdly still like I still consider myself Catholic. I'm still a proud Catholic. I struggle with my belief in God and I religion is man-made and it's deeply flawed
Mm.
because of men and human beings. I don't think my God's better than your God, you know? So there's that. I think I want to believe in a higher power more than I might actually believe, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Here's what I
Okay.
appreciate about that answer. There is so much nuance in what you said, which I feel like sometimes when people talk about religion, because I grew up similar, right? Like my parents weren't super religious, but my family was very Catholic. And I just feel like Latin Catholicism just hits different.
Mhm.
And there's just yeah.
Yeah,
And
probably. Yeah.
yeah, I whatever. All of my thoughts on that. I have no issue with anybody having any sort of relationship with religion, with God, etc. My issue comes in when people feel the need to project their beliefs onto you and make you feel like a shitty person if you don't exactly agree with them. And I think that people's relationship with God or the universe or a higher power, whatever you want to call it, is so individual and so unique to you that when you feel the need to impose it on other people, it's like how I feel when I see people who like shame people into drinking more. I'm like, why are you so
Oh,
Sure.
insecure about your drinking habits that you're like forcing me to drink with
that's
you?
a
Like, that's how I feel about
beautiful
religion.
analogy.
Well, it comes from a couple of things. One, I think, at least Christianity, probably in every religion, there's an element of spreading, the word of God, so to speak,
Mhm.
right? So it's kind of embedded into being a good disciple of whatever faith that you practice, that you try to make other people believe what you believe. So there's that element. And then there's the element of, and probably the more honest assessment, especially nowadays, people projecting like, especially if it's a born again Christian,
Oh,
right? Because
we
it's
know him
like,
well.
well, I found God. So like, and I think it probably comes from a good place, right? The born again Christians, they're usually someone who had some sort of troubled childhood. And it could be all different types of things, but they definitely faced some conflict. They faced kind of moments of maybe hitting rock bottom, and then they met someone or people who converted them, and they found some comfort and peace in this community, which is great. But
I think religion really offers hope in that
Yeah.
perspective. Like if you've
sure,
been through
yeah,
a lot and if you haven't been presented with this idea of hope for something else before, I think if that's presented at the right time, boy, can that help you.
Oh, yeah.
Keep
sure,
going on
yeah.
your thought though.
Yeah, so I just think, yeah, people, as humans, we have a tendency of, if we feel like we've found God and we've found a sense of righteousness, and usually, especially born again, it comes from a place of like, want to repent from maybe guilt that we still feel. And so we project that shame onto other people for, doing what we think is something we used to do. But I personally don't have, I'm definitely not like a former Catholic who's now very resentful of
Mm.
Cool.
my childhood. Like, I went to church every Sunday into my 30s. I was a lector and served communion into my 30s. I just more like stopped going one day. I was just more like, I just feel like I'm not getting anything out of this. And it just
Was
felt
that like a conscientious choice at that time, or did you like look back in hindsight and slowly see yourself kind of just not vibing anymore?
I guess a little bit of both. But it was just more, it was just people. You know, like I guess I
Mm.
just started asking more questions, and I think people just really turned me off about religion. I feel like humans have a way of, weirdly enough, religion was almost an excuse to not be good people. You know,
Oh,
It
not
really
holding themselves
was.
accountable.
It really
Yeah.
And
was. It started wars. It's, us.
well,
Yeah, keep
yeah,
going.
or just like petty fights between friends, or cattiness, or just accountability for their own choices, you know?
Right.
Like I definitely don't believe everything happens for a reason, you know, because I think that's just it's a coping mechanism for either things outside of our control that we can't happen, or more importantly, like things that we can control and we get wrong and we just say, oh, well, it happened for a
Mm.
reason. It's like, oh, maybe we fucked up. And maybe there's
Because
something to
what's
learn from it.
scarier than taking accountability?
Yeah. So yeah, but I definitely do not have, I mean, I definitely had a lot of shame around, like, you know, like sex and dating. Anytime I would hook up with someone in my late teens or early 20s, it was met with like, oh, fuck, I'm burning in hell.
Was that not my first question, Gabby? The second
Yeah.
Natalie texted Gabby Catholicism, I went sex shame.
Yeah.
Literally.
So there's definitely that, but
Yeah.
I was very lucky. Like great parents, and I always like I grew up around priests and nuns. I was very comfortable with that, and I've had nothing but great experiences. So I definitely don't have it. It definitely was not the people I interacted with that turned me away. Honestly, no one really turned me away. It was just me getting older and seeing the world a little bit more honestly, and then I think if you kind of leave the nest, so to speak, and you move out, like, of say Wisconsin, where I moved out of, or the Midwest, and you just meet different people and different cultures and different religions, and like again, just like the idea that my God is somehow better than your God is comical to me.
Yeah.
Or that they're not
But
the same.
then there's
Right.
just a lot of people who in fact believe that it is. That part doesn't make sense for me. So like I think religion has its place because it can do a lot of great things for people, and it can be a sense of community, and it can give people hope and inspire them, and it can keep people just balanced. It can keep people held accountable. We do sometimes need a moral compass, but for me, I found like I was able to do that on my own, and still
Mm.
have a relationship with whatever, I guess, God I believed in, without necessarily like standing and kneeling and saying our Father and taking communion,
Yeah.
and knowing that it's Easter.
Has your family had a similar trajectory? Because don't you have a ton of siblings, don't you? How many
Yeah,
siblings do you
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's definitely. I don't even know like who actively practices. I think my parents still go to church, but even my parents, I think as they've gotten older, I think their children's. I think well, all their kids have had a profound influence on their lives as adults. My parents grew up both conservative. They were introduced by a Catholic priest, and then
Wow.
so much
Whoa.
of their marriage was based off of their religion and faith, and obviously having 10 kids or 11 kids and me having 10 siblings wasn't a coincidence.
Wait, sorry, what number are you?
I'm the second oldest.
Ooh, okay. Or is the
Um,
Wow.
first oldest a boy or a girl?
girl.
Okay. Oldest
Um,
son. Big deal.
so yeah, and so yeah, I mean, I think yeah, that it played a big part of their life. But as their kids gotten older and expanded their point of view on things, like if you live in the same community your whole life, you're just gonna be ignorant about stuff.
Because
It's
it's an
just a
echo
fact.
level. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like you just don't know. It's not like
Right.
it's not coming from a place of hate, or
Right.
it's just you just don't know better. And I think when you have 11 kids who move around and see the world and interact with people. My parents have always been incredibly welcoming and open and kind of a lover of all people. So like whatever they didn't know, it just kind of came from a place of ignorance. And they've always been
Mhm.
kind of willing to have their kids like show them things they didn't know about. And I think that's changed
That's
their point of
rare.
view on certain things. Yeah, I feel incredibly fortunate in that regard because, yeah, parents don't always like to be taught by their kids.
Yeah.
But my parents have been really good that way.
It's slightly tangential, but we all know I love tangents over here. Do we feel like we are allowed today the same excuse of like, oh, like if we lived in Wisconsin before the internet, right? That echo bubble and that chamber and just not knowing, of course that's not malicious, of course that's not your fault, of course that's just where you're at. Do you think we offer or should be offering people the same excuse nowadays with so much access to information? Like, do you think not seeking out other perspectives when it's more readily available than it's been in the past should be considered in how we look at the maliciousness of ignorance? Does that make sense?
I feel like
And I'm
like
speaking in a big picture perspective here,
right.
obviously.
Like I feel like there should be I mean, look, I'm not in school anymore. I don't know what they're teaching kids in elementary school, but I feel like that's a lesson that needs to be taught in schools of like the way to navigate social media and the way to like actually find other opinions and other news that is like productive because I
Right.
feel like the internet is just another version of an echo chamber and it's just
Totally.
like your algorithm is
Totally
just
Yeah.
is.
full of
The
confirmation bias.
internet
Yes.
the
Yeah.
internet is not made to better inform. It's made to keep you obsessed with
Yeah.
whatever it is you're obsessed with.
Or send those reward signals in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, I like you don't have to be the most enlightened person, as a 12-year-old growing up, right? Like, and I think part of life is, leaving the nest and seeing the world. And, we're always going to have some level of ignorance because things are constantly changing. People are constantly evolving and no one's a finished product. And I just think, I think sometimes, especially in the time that we're in, I think people are afraid to even acknowledge their own ignorance, which I think is disappointing and it's a shame because, we live in a time where, if I admit that I have ignorance or I said something ignorant, there's a difference between ignorant and hateful.
Hell
Um,
yeah.
and I think if you can't acknowledge your own ignorance, then you can't learn, and if you're too afraid to acknowledge your ignorance, then it's tough because yeah, you can find things on the internet, but sometimes it's just, the best way to become, for me, a more empathetic and understanding person is to have a conversation with someone who's experienced something that I have a hard time relating to. Like, that's how
Mhm.
I've gotten more empathetic with women. I just have an audience of women and I just listen to their stories all day long. And it's much easier for me to become, more understanding of things that women go through because I'm just listening to them and I'm hearing them. And so wherever your ignorance come from, sitting down with people who can share a different perspective, um, is really helpful. And I think sometimes that can just has to come over time and with experience, and that's part of life. And I think we always tend to learn a little bit better when we're ready to learn.
Exactly.
For
Yeah.
example, one of my shows, people call me for advice. It works because they've written in and they're ready to hear advice. But like, if you're not ready to hear it, you're not listening, and you'll just disagree. So, if we sometimes try to force ideas down people's throats and tell them they have to think or feel a certain way, that's only going to create more conflict. And I don't have the, it's like we're definitely going down a rabbit hole, but like I certainly don't have the answers, but I do feel like we should be allowed to acknowledge our ignorance without the fear of retribution, as long as we're willing to hold ourselves accountable and learn so that we no longer have that ignorance. If you can't admit that you don't know something, then you're never going to learn from it. But we were kind of operating in a time where sometimes people are afraid to even admit that they don't know. It's just like, fuck, I don't know.
Because they think they'll just be canceled for not
Yeah, I
knowing.
mean, there's a little
Right.
bit of that too.
I also want to say that's something that I heard I think is so admirable about you as a man with a microphone, which is funny because that's being shit on all over my For You page, is that I heard you on
Same.
Trash Tuesday say you've done so much listening in that role that you're like, at the same time, I have a job that's me talking and giving advice. And you've had to really learn how to, like, when people are in the position that they're asking for it or not in your real life. And I fucking relate to that because I was a mental health worker. So like, my friends would come to me and I'd be like, do you want me to therapize you right now? Or do you want me to listen?
Like, do you
And
wanna
Yeah.
like
just
your
bitch?
version
Yeah.
of that fucking when you were talking about that fucking hit me because I was like, oh yeah, I had to learn that too because I have fully therapized friends where it was not appropriate.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we
Yeah.
all love to give an opinion.
Of course. Especially when we think our opinions are so good.
Like, give me a microphone. Let me run.
I guess for me though, now that it's become like part of my job, like sometimes I don't have a problem sitting it out. And then sometimes I'm just like, I'll get asked and I'm like, do you really want to hear my opinion?
I feel like you've said that to me before, like when I'll like go on, our like dinners with me, Natalie and Nick, where I'm like, parents, tell me how to live my life. And I feel like you've said that to me before where you're like, do you actually want to know what I'm thinking?
I love
Is
that.
that part of the reason why you felt the need to write your book? Which by the way, if you don't know, Nick has a book coming out. Which by the way, I was very honored when you asked me to read it and give my opinion. I'm pretty sure the
Oh,
first question I asked you, I was like, is it a memoir? Am I gonna have to like give you feedback on your own life? And you were like, no, it's sure
it's
not.
definitely not a memoir. Yeah.
It's not.
She really liked it too. She told
I
me
did
that.
like it. I did like
Yeah.
it. And I thought what I liked about it, and I said it to you in my notes, I was like, so many of these relationship focused books can feel so self-indulgent to the author.
Mhm.
And Meadow and I talk about that a lot. Where like it was something that I felt like I needed to work on in the beginning of this podcast because I was like, oh, I felt the need to react to everything the guest was saying and give my own personal story to back it up and to like relate to them in a certain way when that only gets you so far in life. So what I like about your book and anyone who's reading it or is going to go read it in the future, like I liked that about it, that you gave just enough personal story and personal narrative to give context slash be like, I'm not coming from a place of judgment, but it also wasn't about you, you know?
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Was definitely the goal. A lot of my peers have written memoirs,
Mm.
which, it's fine.
Say less.
Yeah, I guess I was hoping to write a book that might honestly like have a shelf life longer than,
Mhm. Mhm.
a second.
Mm.
And maybe it won't. I don't know. It's not out yet. But yeah, I wanted to, certainly use some of my own stories, but I use obviously stories from people who called into my show, stories from my friends. It was just kind of, anecdotal stories that kind of helped related to the topics I was discussing. Yeah, without making it all about, especially, I mean, again, I have to always be conscious of my audience and who they are. And as a straight white male, like it's not always the most relatable point of view.
We love the
Even,
disclaimer.
uh, but at the same time, I've always like everything I do write about or talk about comes from a place of something I have personally experienced and had to learn the hard way. And my goal is always to try to make people feel more empowered with the choices they make, because I definitely know what it's like to feel helpless when it comes to love and dating and feel fear or feel broken and feel scared. And that can be a really terrifying feeling if you let it be, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that's generally the overall theme of the book, and it's really the theme of everything I talk about, which I think is relatable to anyone. But I think I just had to be mindful and use other people's examples, because that way it gave kind of a variety of context, all while like giving a couple nuggets of like, yeah, I've been in it too. Because like
Mhm.
you said, I wanted to also say like my credibility comes from like I've felt this way and I don't feel this way now, and I have been scared and terrified and have felt broken, and I've gotten through it, and here's how, and here's the things I wish I knew, and hopefully that was enough to
I find it
you know
interesting though when people get so I don't want to use the word angry, but I feel like people get defensive, especially like people in your position when it's like a man giving any sort of advice. People get really defensive and angry about it sometimes. And like, look, I'm in that crowd sometimes. I think there are certain people on the internet that just like do not deserve any sort of microphone or anything.
yeah.
But what I enjoy about your book and what I enjoy about the way that you give advice, because like, listen, I read your Ask Nicks when you do them on Instagram. I'm scrolling through those answers. You constantly go back to that place of like, hey, I've been there, and that's a valid point that you just made of I've been there and I no longer feel this way. Because isn't that the point of everything we're trying to do? It's the point of this fucking podcast. I'm sure it's the point of your podcast and things that we all do is to like make someone feel a little bit less alone. Like, why are we so angry about it, you know?
Yeah, it's just more peace of mind, really. And so whether you get it from me or someone else, um, yeah. But I do one of the more flattering comments I've received on TikTok is the only guy we want to have a mic. So I feel like that.
And it's
Take
because
it.
you're so good with those disclaimers, baby.
Oh yeah,
I
the
think
book has good disclaimers.
that was a win.
That's
Those
awesome.
those comments. But yeah, yeah, because like I was very careful to make it's not about gender in my book, you know, like
Mhm.
it's when I didn't need to specify gender, I didn't. So I often don't. There's definitely no, 5 things guys hate, you know.
Well, that's what I love about your content too, because I'm like a queer girl in a straight relationship, but whenever I listen to shows or advice like that, it feels so fucking heteronormative. It's like hard to listen to. And I think what you always go out of your way to do is make a point about like it's the dynamics between two people in the relationship. It doesn't matter what those gender identities are, but it's
Yeah.
like what is each individual bringing and what energy and what dynamic and like working through that
Mhm.
as it is and like acknowledging it. Like Gabby and I talk about masculine and feminine energies all the time. Like we're not ignorant to that and we're not ignoring that and obviously that plays a huge role, but it also like is not the 5 things guys hate.
Have
Yeah,
you
I
read
mean,
the book Why Men Love Bitches?
I'm familiar with the book.
So my
Um,
friend was just staying with me and she was reading it and she was like, "You need to read this." And I think I made it through like maybe like the first like 70 pages. And like, look, half of it's hilarious and half of it's like, oh, it's interesting to get as like a straight female, like in relationships with men.
who is
It
a woman wrote it?
a woman wrote it, but it is
Okay,
interesting to like hear the perspective in the same way that I like to go to my guy friends with certain things. But at the
totally.
same time, and like we'll talk about it later, I feel like it sort of quantifies things in this like hard and fast way that like leaves no space for gray areas.
But wait, I
Anyway.
do have a dating question though, Nick, because you said
Mhm.
something earlier that I've been thinking of. You said, uh, no one's a finished product. Like we're always learning, we're always growing. And I fully fucking stand by that. Like I always want to be a student. I love learning. But I used to be one of those people before my current partner in relationships where I would say, like, I was always my best self during breakups. Like, anytime I went through a breakup, I got more into who I was as a person. I came back to what I like to do, what I'm interested in, explore your fashion. Like, it gave me the space to come back to who I was. And I always thought that that level of self growth was not possible at the same time being with someone. And
Why
obviously,
not?
he's completely changed my mind
Yeah.
because I wasn't with the right person. And I didn't get the whole 1 + 1 = 3. But I'm curious as for you, where, like, when did that lesson come into play for you? Have you always been that way in relationships? Did that come like throughout the journey? Like, how is your personal development while dating, especially in the public eye to this fucking extreme? Like, I'm just curious how that's been for you.
Yeah, I mean, my 20s was based off of primarily 3 serious relationships.
Wait, sorry, context. How old were you when you went on The Bachelor the first time?
33.
33. Okay, so
Yeah.
20s are all prior
Yeah.
to industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I don't remember having a thought about it, and I guess I don't really remember having an epiphany where I'm like, "Oh, I'm never a finished product." But I suppose I've always on some level thought that about life, you know.
Mhm.
And I think part of it comes from my days of being an athlete back in the day and, you
I don't
know,
know why I thought the words that were gonna come out of my mouth was me being an asshole back in the day. I was
oh,
like, "Oh, good self-reflection, Nick."
uh,
Gabby hears the word athlete and thinks the word asshole. What does that say about you, babe?
yeah, that's a
Yeah,
projection.
we all know.
Yeah.
We'll get to your dating questions after.
Great.
Yeah, so, because if, as an athlete, you're constantly trying to excel and grow and get better. So
Yeah.
there's that mindset I
Mhm.
think helps. But yeah, I mean, because I was definitely, I was in my 20s, I was the opposite of you. I definitely did not embrace heartbreak and breakups. Like,
Okay.
uh, and to survive it, I had to change my mindset and
Mm.
get to the mental state of mind that I am now. And that's, I guess, why I'm passionate about it, because I'm definitely, I use this term loosely, but there is some truth to it where like I do feel like I'm a survivor of heartbreak, you know,
Oh,
That was
and
tender.
no.
and
Cute.
and heartbreak that really broke me
Yeah.
and made me really scared if I would be okay. And a lot of it I made worse on myself, you know?
Mm.
And I made worse mostly because of it was kind of my own, like it all came from a good place of wanting to love so hard, and I took a lot of things I learned from my parents that was like noble and good, but like I just kind of didn't use it properly, you know? And I didn't know how to let go, and I didn't know how to accept, and I wasn't kind of self-aware about my ego and the role that played and things like that. I've come a long way from the person who had been heartbroken or dealt with heartbreak, even if I was breaking up with the person, to someone who like understands that you don't have to let yourself hurt that much. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you weren't in love or that it wasn't meaningful. You just have to accept, let go, and then move forward. And that can be exciting as much as it can be scary. But that idea that you're not a finished product can be like peace of mind, because I think when you're younger and your 20s, there's something in our brains that feel like 25's the end, you know? And so it's like, you know,
Yeah.
I need to have it all figured out, you know? And it's, if you don't, that can be scary, but you're not supposed to. But, you know, when you're 18 or 17, it felt so old, and, you know, kind of society used to tell us to be finished products in our early to mid 20s. And that's changed a
Oh,
little bit, but
100%. I've said it to Meadow a million times that I never felt some type of way about a birthday until I turned 25. And it
Yeah.
like
oh,
everything hit
I
me.
panicked on my 25th birthday.
Oh yeah.
I had legit kind of a breakdown.
Let's talk about it. What'd you do on your 25th birthday? How did it go for you?
It was a rainy Wednesday, and I went to a baseball game with my
Oh,
family.
he was like, I
but-
know
Oh,
exactly
I
what the
know.
weather was.
And
where-
I just remember feeling really bad about myself. I was like, I'm a fucking loser.
Oh.
Yeah, I was, I just wasn't where I thought I would be, which I think is pretty
Yeah.
common for people in their 20s. I mean, and when you're, it's so crazy, but when you're in your mid to early 20s, you're trying to live up to the expectations you set for yourself when you were 17.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's just insane.
And it's like,
What
why
the
am
fuck
I
did we
listening to
know?
what? Yeah, exactly. Why am I listening to what my 17-year-old ass thought that I should be doing? Like,
yeah,
bitch, I've learned so much from that. Why am I doing that?
but
I really
that's what we
like-
do. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what you said though, because I fucking feel that about my one real, like my first breakup ever was my real earth shattering one that made all my other breakups. I was like, fuck it, I'm not doing that again. And I was 18 and whatever. We don't have to go through the whole story, but I do viscerally remember thinking like, if I don't hurt this bad, I didn't love them that much. Like I wanted to hurt as much as I loved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such faulty fucking logic. Like, what?
That just
Like, I just think that's so what you said that. You said, like, you don't have to hurt that deep. Like, you can choose to, like, acknowledge all the love you had and still not let that hit as hard and move on and process through that. And I think that's so important to emphasize.
People often make the mistake of thinking that the pain they feel means they should keep fighting for something.
Exactly.
And it has nothing to do with it. It's just pain of something ending and sadness.
And that's okay. And you
Yeah.
can feel all that. But you don't have to act because of it.
Also, yes, okay, I agree with what both of you are saying about like living in that pain. So I think that's a thing that dramatic people like me enjoy doing, because then you can be like, oh, like look, I'm sitting
Oh
in it.
yeah, I call it love to hurt so good.
Yeah.
But
It's so
also
good.
part of the reason why we do that is because it's like the stages of a breakup. It's you hurt, and you actually choose to hurt more.
Yeah.
Because it's the only thing you have left of the relationship
Of
and the
them.
person. And the moment you actually say, no, I'm not going to keep thinking about their birthday or the car they drive, and I'm not going to keep noticing, even though you're like going out of your way to notice, You're just like, that's all I see is this. It's like you're looking.
It's like you're checking their story every day.
Yeah.
Because we want to tell ourselves it means something, or there's a bigger spirit or thing out there. And it's just scary to say goodbye to something. It's scary to let go. That's something a lot of us do when going through a breakup, is because it's scary to say goodbye. Because it's one thing to be broken up with and
Right.
they break our heart, so maybe they're already dating someone else. But it's hard to let go of hope. And I think a side effect of holding on to a hope that you should let go is unnecessary, pain and heartbreak and suffering that we put on ourselves as a way to validate our choices. So,
what's another type of pain and suffering and fear that we put on ourselves that we like don't need to, is just like this concept of situationships, which I feel like I was introduced to in college and I just thought it was like a really fucked up crush. And I thought I just like really loved having crushes on people. And then it wasn't until like this year when that term sort of started like going around and people were actually talking about it that and also I was single, or I am single, and like living in that and going through those things, that I was like, why am I putting myself through such unnecessary situations because no one's communicating? So I want to talk to you about hookup culture because I have so many thoughts and I like how you talk about it on Ask Nick and in your book and on the podcast, et cetera, et cetera. And one of my first thoughts with it is that I feel like because everybody's talking about it, we're creating these like hard and fast rules that I brought up a little bit before, especially like when I was talking about that book, Why Men Love Bitches, where it leaves no room for gray area. And I feel like it's giving people an excuse to not use their deductive reasoning skills and like use their fucking brain and like actually listen to what their heart and brain and like soul needs and wants. And you talk a lot about it in the book, but through the lens of setting expectations and knowing what your expectations are ASAP and like acknowledging those things with the other person. So I wanted you to speak a little bit about that and about setting expectations. Is it too soon? Are you going to scare someone away? I think that's the fear that a lot of people have, especially in these like situationshipy type of things, because it's such a fucking scary territory, because you're like, at least in relationships, you know what you are. But when you're in these like weird hookup situationships, there's no communication. And then
Wait, Gaby, we
Mhm.
should totally get Nick's opinion on Jesse's intentional dating protocol right now.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that. Okay, but let's talk
That's
about setting expectations, please. Can you give me like a rundown? Teach me.
yeah.
Asking for a friend.
Well, there's expectations and then there's boundaries. So expectations are just things that you want for yourself or of your partner if you're in a relationship, or the people you let in your circle. And you should always be upfront with your expectations. And the person you should be upfront with those first is yourself, which that's the biggest mistake people make, is they don't. They pretend that they're okay with things they're not okay with.
Right.
For fear of things like rejection or not getting what they want, or just maybe they just don't want to be bored. And so they avoid setting up for expectations for, like you said, Gaby, like, oh, well, it's going to scare them away. We talk so much and, about holding people accountable and expecting more from the people we date. But if we don't expect more from ourselves, then how can we hold the people we date more accountable? So like if you're tired of being fuckboyed by a fuckboy, if you're tired of being in a situationship, like you have to ask yourself, what could I be doing differently? And part of it is like, you don't have to try to be the cool chick or the cool person. And, when I talk about hookup culture, it's more just acknowledging what it is and what it isn't,
Right.
Because, people have all these different opinions on what it means to be hooked. Like people will be like, well, I've never had a one-night stand. It's like, okay, congratulations.
Great. You're a loser. Just kidding. Just kidding.
But that doesn't mean like you haven't participated in hookup culture. And then,
right.
People, it's just like, well, we know each other so well. It's like, do you though? Because like, how many times have you heard the story? It's just, well, we were dating for like, 2.5, 3 months, and then,
oh my God.
And then he said how much he liked me,
single
and
one
then
of my
like,
situations.
and then it's just like one day he didn't, and I'm just like, and I'm like, well, you didn't set any expectations. You just started having sex, and that's
Mhm.
fine. Have sex.
Mhm.
And people like will ask me like, well, how soon should I have sex with someone? As if like
A
there's
right
A
answer to
fucking
that.
book. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm just a big believer in the fact that people aren't prioritizing what it means to have an emotional connection with someone.
Well, I mean, how could you too when like we have all of these things at our disposal? We have all these dating apps where it's like a fucking game and you're just swiping, swiping, swiping. Like
Yeah,
it's
well,
like
and I think people now that we have hookup culture, right? So hookup culture essentially people just, we are far more accepting of sex outside
mhm.
of relationship and marriage.
Which is still really new.
Still
Yeah.
really new,
Like, I
and
think we all act like that's like a baseline of what it should be. And like, I'm so pro sex, like, I get it. But I also am aware of the fact that like this is a very fucking new concept for a lot of the population still alive right now.
Mhm.
well, yeah, not only that, but it's still relatively new, but at the same time, it's like people often confuse sex positivity with like still respecting what sex means. And also with pretending like it doesn't still play a significant role in a relationship, and
Mm.
things like
Mhm.
that. And I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
people, now that we're having sex outside of relationships, are using sex as a way to determine the strength of a connection or how much someone may or may not like them. And, part of it is like, oh, I'm afraid to sleep with them too soon because, you know, um, like I'm afraid that like it'll change how they feel about me. But like they also want to like, hook up and have sex with this person, and they'll say things. Well, he said he liked me. It's just like he probably did like you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but now he doesn't anymore.
Well, you say sex in a good way in the book where you make a comment that I want to like clarify to people listening of you talk about the very simple concept that we forget of have sex when you want to have sex because you want to have sex, not because it's going to
Yeah,
impact the way that someone feels about
yeah.
you.
Yes.
Well, if you're having sex in hookup culture, I'm a big believer in have sex because you want to have sex and for no other reason.
Right.
Because if you're hooking up in hookup culture, that means you are having sex with someone you don't have an established emotional connection. And what I mean by because I get a lot of like,
People get so angry at you.
so they're like, what do you mean? I
Define
have,
established emotional
I
connection.
and I define it by basically saying, you know what? It means that you're not confused. You're not wondering if they're gonna
Yeah.
call. You're not wondering how they feel about you.
Yeah.
You feel confident that they are aware of your insecurities. You're already aware of things they don't even like about you, and you're still like you're not worried every day if they're still gonna be there. That
Yeah.
as a minimum. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that, if you're still wondering or slightly insecure about how they feel about you, or even if they like you, despite what they said, but like, do you really believe that? And are you, can you be your truest self around them out of fear, without fear of judgment, or if they're still going to accept you? That's the minimum. Right. And that takes time. And it takes longer than a week or 5 dates or 10 dates. It sometimes takes months. It really depends on how much you want to be open and share and things like that. But sex isn't going to change that. Sex doesn't bring, having sex with someone in the third or fourth week doesn't make you closer from an emotional connection standpoint. Like it can make you, there's a
Mhm.
bond certainly with sex, but it's just through the act of sex and the bond of sex, but
Like the chemical.
yeah,
Yeah.
it
Whatever.
doesn't,
Oxytocin.
they can't all of a sudden read your mind and know what you're insecure about you and make you feel accepted. It doesn't give you a sense of,
imagine,
yeah.
imagine literally like two people come and it's like they exchange information like in that moment. How easy life would be.
Yeah, so too many people are out there hooking up in hookup culture, too afraid to define their relationship, but willing to have sex, and then feeling a lot of frustration and disappointment and feeling used when feelings inevitably change because, you know, we only knew 10% about this person. And once they learned 40%, they were like, I don't know if this is the person for the rest of my life. And we get angry and sad because we feel like, well, but you said you liked me,
Mhm.
and I decided to have sex with you based off the fact that you said you liked me. And it was like, but
They did maybe right
maybe they
then, and they
did.
don't
And
now.
you
That's
decide, yeah, you
Well,
had sex without an established connection, which is fine, have sex. But like the only way you're going to avoid disappointment is to choose to have sex because you want to have sex with someone you like and treats you
who also wants
nicely,
to have sex with
who also wants
you.
to have sex and who likes you. But you guys, you have to be honest that like there's so much more to learn about each other, and we just pretend that's not the case. And
Yeah.
that wasn't a problem before hookup culture was a thing because there was a lot of shame and judgment around sex. So there's more people waiting, and they weren't comfortable with like so freely having sex outside of relationships. And now that we are, we have to create new boundaries and new conversations around this so that we feel less disappointed and caught off guard or used. But again, it starts with setting expectations with ourselves of what do I want out of this situation I've chosen to be a part of? Like, what do I want from
And
this?
but then how do you then go take that step? Because it's one thing to like know what you want out of it and have that clarity in your mind, but then it's another thing to actually communicate it to the other person. And I feel like that's where things often get lost in translation, or you expect the other person to know what you're thinking and we end up disappointed. So how do you actually, in your opinion, think the best way to communicate that? When is it too soon? Because that's where I was saying when I brought up earlier, like the concept of like scaring someone off is like,
about like what you're
when
looking
is
for.
and like having that
what do you
conversation
mean
of
by
like, this is where I'm
scaring
at.
someone off?
Because for example, right, let's say you're in a situation, like as if I'm not talking about a situation that I was exactly in, and you approach it from because I always like what you and Natalie always say this, and I think it's so true, where it's like the first mistake so many people make is going into a room being like, what are
Yeah.
we? No, you go into a situation, we've said on the podcast, you go in a situation telling someone where you're at, where
Yes.
you want, what you want. And then if they meet you there, they meet you there. Great. If they don't, they don't. And you say it in the book too. Not me remembering quotes from your
I
book of you being
know.
like, rejection rejection is
Clarity.
clarity,
Yeah.
something about that. So
Rejection's still an
I guess
answer. Yeah.
rejection's an
Yeah.
answer. You get the clarity from that situation. But I guess some people, and not even me, to like, I know I'm joking about my situations a lot, but I've had this conversation with friends where they feel like if they bring something up with the person they're hooking up with, let's say like, I don't know, whatever date number that they feel comfortable doing it, they feel like the other person's going to automatically jump to the conclusion of like, oh my God, this person's like, I know they're saying this, but they're trying to date me. Like, or oh my God, they're
Well,
like,
then
they just
they
get,
do.
mhm,
I mean,
Exactly.
it
And it's
comes down
also
to
like
what
don't
you.
communicate based on assumption.
It also comes down to like what do
right.
you really want from this relationship or situation that you're in. Again, if you're
Yeah.
looking to, if this person's a fuck buddy, and you get some real good sex from this person, and deep down they're not ready for a relationship, then I guess I understand avoiding conversations because you don't want to ruin this
Yeah.
good thing, and that good thing is some real good sex. But other than that,
Yeah.
again, people, they'll say they want to find their person, and they'll say they want a relationship, and then invest in a bunch of people, or just be afraid to find out that the person they're hanging out with isn't on the same page as them. And people are so afraid to get that clarity, because often that clarity means quote unquote rejection, to find out
Right.
that the person I'm excited about isn't as excited about me as I am with them. And we just hate hearing it, so we avoid it. So once we get better at just, dealing with a little bit of rejection, and that rejection is, it's just someone is saying, nah, I don't want what you want. And then our egos make it feel really scary, because it's, egos like to tell us that we're losers, but like,
I literally was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, do you think this is like a self-worth thing? Because in my
Yeah.
mind, I've totally been there, but because I'm in a relationship now, in my mind, hearing like, oh, I don't want to say something because I'm worried they're not gonna meet that, or meet that with rejection. It's like, well, then if someone doesn't want you, why the fuck you want them?
True,
You
but
know,
like we're
like
so afraid of,
Right.
but people don't see someone not liking them as a valid reason to understand that they're not your person.
Which is like, I'm
That's
sorry,
nuts!
psychotic behavior to me.
Nuts!
Like, Like, babe, they're telling you, like,
Yes.
listen.
Yeah,
I don't
because
get
and
it.
that's
I don't
because
get
it's because our ego. It's a what I refer
It's
to
the
as like a
ego.
ego triggering event, and then when our egos
Yeah.
are triggered, they they take over and they tell you that you're doing something wrong, and because your ego is
Mhm.
simultaneously telling you you're a loser while also telling you there's no possible way someone can't
Right.
like you. So
Right.
you just need to figure out what it is that you're doing wrong and fix it fast. And we become kind of consumed by that mentality rather than saying, wait, this person doesn't appreciate and see what I bring to the table, even though there's so many other people who will. And like, I don't like, at a minimum, I'm not going to invest into someone who doesn't like see that in me. And to see that as a flaw in them rather than a flaw in yourself is, I think, something most people need to really try to work on, and something certainly I've had to work on. And it's really just comes down to acknowledging your ego and the role it plays. But you have to understand your self-worth and believe that you bring something to the table, and see people's lack of interest and investing in you as a problem for them as it relates to you.
Do you remember
Period.
Yeah, seriously. Do you remember your first conversation clearly communicating your expectations and boundaries to Natalie?
No.
And what date was it? Number
Don't
3?
give us every
I mean,
detail.
I'm a pretty communicative guy, so I've never had a problem with telling people what I want and think and feel. And with Natalie, it was, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, like probably the first weekend we met, but that boundary was we'll never date.
Oh my God, that's right.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
um,
he was like, "I'm not
She
gonna
really
date
had
you."
to
She was
you
like,
made her
"Great."
work.
She said, "Bet, find out."
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I
Love that
just
girl.
at the time, not knowing much about her, I didn't, I didn't want to, I didn't want to give her false expectations, and at the time, that's how I felt about the situation. So I was quick to set those expectations, which I still believe like was a good thing because we were never not on the same page. Like
Yeah.
we never
Okay, but
wondered
wait.
what the other person was thinking.
Right.
That's how I feel about
But
Aaron and I too.
here's my question with that. Because you're saying in that situation, you're telling Natalie, "I'm not gonna date you." And we can hear from, I mean, she's not here to defend herself or say exactly what she was thinking, but what if in that situation she was like, "No, but I wanna date him," and continued to pursue you, giving up her own boundary, and then
Well,
now
maybe
look, you
that
guys are
wasn't
fully
her.
together and, like,
I
very
can't speak
happy.
for her, but at the time, it could not have been her boundary. Like, well, we didn't really know each other then, so she wasn't
Mhm.
invested in me at all.
Mhm.
Right, okay, okay,
And
okay, okay. This was early on.
and and so I feel I can say comfortably that she didn't have this, like, she's not delusional, right? So like we didn't know each other, so she's like, okay,
Right.
thanks for letting me know. And we still like enjoy each other's company, but we never, so we weren't, so early on, I think me saying that did offer some clarity for both of us because she always knew where I stood. And like, now granted, as we
Mm,
kept hanging out, she would check in, she
Mhm.
would say,
okay, so
hey,
that's the
like
key.
we have been hanging out. And I know you said this before, but like, my feelings are starting to change, and this is what I want. Do you still feel the same way? And early on, I would be like, I do, unfortunately. And so, like, you can set a boundary and force it, and then reevaluate that and change. But like, it's all about if when you start asking, like, people spend too much time, like, first having conversations with themselves instead of having conversations with the person they're supposed to be having it with, and then they
Or
have
with their friends.
yeah, oh yeah. Then the next step is having it with their friends instead of the person they
Yep.
should be having it with.
And then the next step is
Yeah,
TikTok and
and
the
the
internet
Then
internet,
it's the
and
podcast.
and then they finally get to that person, and they don't even tell them. They're just like, "So what do you want? You know,
Right.
what are you
yeah.
thinking? What do
'Cause they
you?"
think they've communicated to them, but no, you've communicated to everyone else in your echo chamber, and
So
not them.
yeah,
Here's my issue with the fucking internet in this situation is like, m okay, when you're obsessing with something with your friends, I feel very lucky that I have a group of friends where they only give me a certain amount of time to talk about something. And if they start to see me obsessing, you guys shut it down real fast and are like, "All right, ma'am." But then
you
we
just
can
go find
turn to
you
our
go find
phones.
another friend, or a phone, or
Or
I
you go
used to
on
do
your
that,
phone and then
yeah.
the internet is just like it's a
Yeah.
and the thing is I was never I mean, I don't wanna say I was never an obsessive type of person, but I don't think it was as bad as it got probably, like, I don't know, like, 5 months ago, for example. Like, I feel like I've really worked through the obsessive phase, but I was, like, in this obsessive thing, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, A, like, my friends weren't shutting down the conversation, and B, not to blame you guys, but and B, that, like, the internet, like, I that's when I, like, really started going on TikTok,
Yeah.
and it really started, like, reinforcing all the narratives, and I felt like I had this never-ending stream of someone to talk
Did you
to
Yeah.
did you
about
read my
it.
chapter on the internet is not your therapist?
Oh,
Sure
sure.
did.
It's in her notes.
But that's my point.
One of
Yeah,
her
I mean,
favorites.
the internet is definitely it's a place we go to for comfort, and it does not it's a place to get stuck, not to find yeah, the internet will just feed into your obsession. So whatever you're feeling, it will reinforce that feeling. It won't help that feeling. It's actually designed to do that. So it's definitely not a place for that. So
Or
we
social media, I think, not the internet.
I
Social
I
media.
include the internet with social
Yeah.
media. The internet is part of social media. Social media is part of the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Like, what
specifically.
came first, chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
But truly,
Yeah.
like, I mean, you can find whatever you're looking for. So, and it's just confirmation bias. And when we're fragile and broken and sad, and we're looking for hope specifically, uh, we can find hope through the internet. And that's not usually, when we're heartbroken, hope's not necessarily, uh, well, hope has its time and place, but we need to be careful how we look for hope when we're vulnerable.
We just found the Venn diagram of internet and religion. Gives you hope.
I
Look at the full circle.
Yeah.
literally took the words out of my
Her
mouth.
circle
I was
moment.
like, don't find it in religion.
What was this intentional dating thing you guys were talking about?
Oh, Meadow, take it away.
Okay, so we have a friend that we got lunch with recently that said that they're on this kind of new program working with a group of life coaches that have
Oh boy.
they're all a bunch of like old, like I say old, God, that was rude of me. Sorry, women. They're a bunch of like 50-something-year-old New Yorker women. And they
Older.
have this protocol where
Older.
it was, gosh, Gabby, you're gonna have to help support me because I kind of forget. But
Oh,
it was like
I'll take it
there was
away.
like 3 breakdowns, and they're the 3 H's, and it's called head, heart, and hoo-ha. And when you go on dates with people, you have to like communicate your expectations or your boundaries very clearly, very intentionally. And they make a point to say that, and they want you to do that and come back with how those conversations went, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of your dates, you give each person 3 dates and you rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. Your
You're
head,
not
heart,
telling
and
this
hoo-ha.
person.
Yeah, you're not telling them. This is all just your internal reflection.
Okay.
And you under those 3 categories, you list what's important for you. So like emotional compatibility or someone that understands this part of me, whatever it may be. You like
Mhm.
write whatever those rules are for yourself. And then you rate them on how much you felt that you got that from this person. You give them the Girl Scout 3 bites.
Mhm.
And then if they are an 8 out of 10 or higher, or was it 7, Gabby?
Whatever the
Whatever,
I
It
don't
was
know.
either
Whatever
8
the
or
score
7 out of
is.
10 or higher, then you continue to date them.
But here's what I like about it. Hold on. Before we get into the commentary, this is what I liked about it. And it's also coming from a person that Meadow and I like deeply trust and respect.
Oh
Is like
my
probably
gosh.
what we should
Above all
lead
else.
with.
Yeah.
But
Who created this
here's what
thing?
I like about it is I have no idea.
What'd you say? Sorry?
The
You said who
person.
created
No,
this?
so it's not the person.
It's a group of life coaches
Gotcha.
No.
based out of New York.
Our friend is participating in it.
Yeah.
Not
He
they
did not
didn't
create
create it.
this. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they didn't create it. So but what I like about it
And
is
he
that
admitted that some of it is flawed, but it's still kind of
no, I can't because everything is nuanced.
Yeah,
But what I like about it is that it allow because obviously we can talk shit about any type of anything. But what I liked about this is that it allows people and gives people the space and sort of forces you to sit down and set your expectations and actually be
Put
clear
'em
about
on
what you
paper.
want before somebody enters the picture so that you are
Exactly.
then not swayed by like someone's charisma or like because they're fucking hot.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I like the idea of going on a date with 3 dates with someone. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, listen, if you have a terrible time, you just know that
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
most dates,
Don't go
most
back.
first dates are just kind of whatever. And I think it's good. I think I think it's good to, second or third date to really get comfortable and familiar with someone. And, it takes more than 1 or 2 dates usually to kind of have a breakthrough, I suppose, and make it,
Just like
Mhm.
sex.
yeah, make a
Just throwing
connection
it
with
out
someone.
there.
Yeah. So I do
Yeah.
like that idea. And I think if people incorporated that type of mindset into their dating, it would serve them much better than how they're going about it now on, you know, basically just matching people on dating apps, not even going on dates. That's the thing. People are just holding out dates for these incredibly special occasions. It's like you got to meet people, you got to interact with them. That's why, like, I know it's like people are just like, oh, I don't want to do like, but like, I think people should just Zoom date and speed date and do those things because, like,
Totally.
like at least you might get to know someone and like you don't have to leave your house. You don't have to spend money. Like this could have been a date, like if it wasn't a
The
podcast and
definition of this could have been
yeah,
a phone
and
call.
so
Like,
like
this could have been an email.
and you can be like, oh wow, you get to see how they look and their body
Body
language
language.
and things like that. And we just need to get more swings. But people are they're acting like they're taking these swings or at bats, so to speak, and they're really not. They're not. They're passing the time by swiping left or swiping right, and having the occasional like superficial text conversation that sounds something like, "What are you doing tonight?" "Oh, just hanging out with my roommate." "That's cool.
Right.
We should hang out sometime."
God, I
"Sounds
hate
good,"
those.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I get it, right? Because it's just like if you're a guy, even if you're a progressive guy and even if you're a progressive woman, there's still the, expectation that the guy pays for the first date, I don't That's pretty common. That can get expensive for women, like every time you go out with a strange guy is just another chance that things could get weird or wrong, I get it. So like
Mhm.
we need a safer, more efficient way of getting to know people all while qualifying them and not having it feeling like expensive or exhausting. And let's just use the technology that's available to us, whether it's a Zoom date or FaceTime or whatever. But like we need to start talking and getting to know people. For me, like I used to like that's kind of how I met Natalie, but like I've always liked meeting people and I have a lot, like people who don't live in the same state and kind of having these like 2 or 3 week kind of FaceTime love affairs because like
Mm.
it
Wow.
builds up that physical tension. It makes you have
Mhm.
conversations because you're not there. And so you find yourself communicating and connecting. Um, and I think there's something there, and I think we need to try to do more of that because yeah, dating is exhausting. Going on dates and then if we have like an okay time, it's like I don't want to get dressed up and plan a date for
Totally.
someone I had an okay time with, but like
Right.
they're nervous or you just had a heart, but like sometimes you just find that one common interest and it's a whole different story. So I very much like the idea of giving someone 2 or 3 dates before moving on. And I think if generally people did that, I think they would increase their chances of building connections with people.
Totally. Did you ever
I don't
like or
even
watch the show Master of None? Aziz
Uh,
Ansari?
I never got into it.
Okay, just
Yeah.
because there's a couple like scenes about dating that are really funny that are just flashing in your mind while you're talking. But then also the latest season they did, the third season, is like it's 5 episodes and it's only Lena Waithe in her relationship. And it's kind of showing like the intricacies and nuances of a like long-term comfortable relationship. And I think
Mhm.
it is like one of the
No,
most
I've seen a few episodes. It's
beautifully
great.
done. Like, even if you didn't like the first 2 seasons have nothing to do with season 3. So I kinda want you to watch season 3 and then
Mhm.
let me know what you think, because I thought it was one of the most beautiful and, like, romantic and truthful and honest insights into a long-term relationship that I'd seen on TV before.
Also, Meadow and I are just, like, really have a weird
Lena
obsession
yeah,
with Lena
Lena
Waithe,
anything
so
Lena Waithe, we worship, so
we're
Okay.
like,
take that with a
"Okay."
grain.
Let's check it out. But I don't know. I do
Truly.
like this intentional dating thing. I think there is
Kinda
something
cool,
there.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as the the game has drastically changed, but the playbook hasn't. And I think we just need to start rewriting the
Hey.
playbook. And I think
Bars.
that's a way of doing that, you know.
I don't even have anything to
Yeah,
add
end
because I
on
feel like that
that.
is the most beautiful way. We could talk to you about this for so long. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you so much.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. We appreciate you. We think Nick should have a microphone.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
The one
Thanks.
man allowed with a microphone.
The one man allowed
Nick
with a
Viall,
microphone.
turn in. The one man that women claim is allowed to have a microphone. That should be your slogan. Women everywhere agree.
You're welcome for the rebrand.
I think the moment I start like putting that on my profile is the moment they would take the mic away from me. So
We'll put it out there.
I'll let other people say it, and I will appreciate it being said, but I will. That's as far as it'll go.
Oh my god!
Incredible, Nick, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the Thoughts Mayberry podcast every Monday.